Our guest is an alchemist and an author. He studied the ancient use of natural materials from the age of 12, and that led him to the Paracelsus Research Society, later known as the Paracelsus College, under the guidance of Dr. Albert Riedel, also known as Frater Albris. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and immediately began to work at the Paralab as the chief chemist, where he was able to document and perfect alchemy experiments. Robert is currently living in the Pacific Northwest, where he's been teaching classes and workshops on practical alchemy for the past 5 years. His latest book, Real Alchemy, is now available. Welcome, Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're really delighted. I have a couple of questions for you, and I hope that you can help our audience know a little bit more about your new book.
Yeah.
Could you explain to us what alchemy is?
Well, alchemy is actually one of the most ancient of the sacred sciences. Its origins are stretching far back into history. In the terms of the alchemists themselves, alchemy was the transformation and transmutation of metals. But in a broader sense, this transformation takes place on all different levels, not just a physical level, but mental and spiritual levels, and not just for metals, but for all creatures. All of creation is going through this process of transformation. One alchemist described alchemy as celestial agriculture.
Oh my gosh.
And this is a sense that everything in nature is alive and transforming, going through a process of development. Frater Albertus described alchemy as a process of consciously assisted evolution, where the operator himself is consciously involved in his own evolution.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot more than the commonly held belief that it's transmuting base metals into gold. If you look in the dictionary, that's the standard definition for alchemy, turning lead into gold. But there's quite a bit more to it than just that.
Mm-hmm. And can you go into a little more depth about the origin of alchemy?
The origins of alchemy are lost to history. In most of the scholars will agree that alchemy in the Western tradition began in ancient Egypt, possibly 10, 12,000 years ago. According to ancient legends and stories, even back then, alchemy had a divine origin. There was a race of spiritually ascended people who walked the earth and taught mankind the arts of civilization. Mm-hmm. And even in ancient times, there were fantastic stories that God taught it to Adam, later to Moses and Abraham. Fallen angels taught it to human women in exchange for sexual favors. And these were in ancient times. Mm-hmm. In more recent times, it's been proposed that this was a technology that stems from Atlantean technology, that aliens brought it to Earth. But if you follow the thread of history itself, somewhere in ancient Egypt, there was a sacred science. It was called the divine art. And that was the origins of alchemy. And you can actually follow the processes through the various priesthood who kept this as a secret science, and it was passed along from generation to generation under oaths of secrecy. It was developed as a secret science and very closely guarded secrets. So in the Western tradition, the father of alchemy is known as Thoth, this guy here. He was the god of wisdom and science and magic, the originator of alchemy. Later, he was associated with the Roman god Hermes, and alchemy became known as the Hermetic art due to that association with Hermes. And alchemy developed over time as this secret science in Egypt, and later passed into Greek recognition as the Greeks moved into Egypt later in around 300 BC. And alchemy became known to the Greek world as chem, or chemia, the dark art, the black art.
Right.
And so alchemy is the original of the black arts associated with chem, or the dark land, the black land of Egypt.
I see.
There were other traditions in the Far East that followed alchemy as well. And
Oh, that's fascinating. So can you tell us why it was oppressed? Why was it oppressed in history, in Europe, and then maybe also as well as other societies?
alchemy has been called the perennial philosophy. It has periods where it's been suppressed in history and only to bloom again somewhere else at some other time. One of the largest depressions occurred around 290 AD when the Emperor Diocletian became fearful that this artificial gold produced by the Egyptian secret science could actually allow someone to amass enough wealth to overtake Rome. So he passed an edict calling for the destruction of all materials and written works dealing with alchemy. That's why the thread of history has been lost because a lot of it was destroyed at that time. Mm-hmm. Later on in history, alchemy disappeared from the Egyptian scene and surfaced in the Arabian countries, and again because of the persecution of the Roman Empire largely. Later it made its way into Western Europe with the conquest, Arab conquest later around 800 AD. It moved up into Western Europe, and alchemy became favorable again. And people, rich and poor, were interested in alchemy because they had heard of these wonderful things that alchemy could do. Turning lead into gold was the big one. And so the West is always going for the gold, and so people, rich and poor, were involved in alchemy, and it had another heyday of alchemical enlightenment, and it was a popular subject. But as with anything, there were a lot of cons and scams perpetrated on people. People would come in and say that they knew the secrets of the alchemists, and for a small sum they could teach you this and that, and pretty soon people were getting ripped off for their life savings in hopes of being able to find out the secret of creating gold from lesser metals, which the alchemists promised. And so this prompted the Pope in around 1310 to decree alchemy, to outlaw alchemy. The practice of alchemy again was outlawed because of all these scams and cons, and alchemy was labeled a fraud, and it got a really bad name. So alchemy was again suppressed and pushed down. Another reason that alchemy was suppressed is because a lot of the ideas involved with alchemy were contrary to what the church was trying to teach. Alchemists understood everything as being alive. Everything possesses a body, it possesses a soul and an animating life force, a spirit.
I see.
And to the church, that was not acceptable. Only a man could have a soul. How could a rock have a soul?